It's great to be joined by Dermot this morning. He's a productivity thought leader, an expert on harnessing technology to change behaviours, founder of Adapt Productivity and author of Smart Work and Smart Teams, and he'll take you through those in a moment. So who are we? We're Engage Squared, and we're hosting this series of webinars. My name's Jack and I'll be facilitating for you this morning. So our mission at Engage Squared is to bring people and technology together to drive secure productivity. We achieve this by modernising business processes using Microsoft technologies for enterprise customers, and there are our sort of four main business streams there. What's coming next? We have our next episode in the work from home webinar series at the start of June, and that's going to be on governance, quick start governance within teams. Governance is a core issue amongst a lot of organisations. This will be a great one. We're postponing this one until June because there's a great event happening across the whole of May, which is called Microsoft 365 May. So there's over 110 sessions featuring experts in all areas, talking about all things Microsoft 365. So as I said, we'll be sharing these slides, but the links to those events are there. We've also completed our work from home survival kit. So basically this is sort of covering the fundamentals that can help everybody stay grounded and connected to a collective purpose through these difficult times. So, our goal with this was really to make a toolkit to make your lives a bit easier when you're working from home, so you can focus on the things that matter. We're pretty proud of it, and we'll be sending this out to all of the participants to this session after this as well. So watch out for that. And before I hand over to Dermot to present his segment, I'd like to sort of ask the audience a question. What have been your main productivity blockers during this crisis? Please sort of engage with the chat function, pop your message in there, and as I said, we'll try and circle around and answer some of those later. So I'll hand over to Dermot now, if you want to.
Wonderful, thanks, Jack. Hey everyone, Dermot Crowley is my name. I'm the director of a Sydney-based company called Adapt Productivity, and I've probably spent the last 25 years or so working with organizations on how they manage their time, their priorities, their information using technology. So when I first started out in the productivity training space, there was no technology to help us back then. We used to teach people how to use paper diary systems. And look, back in those days, a paper diary was perfectly appropriate because we just weren't as busy. We didn't get as much information as we do now. But things changed over that time. Obviously, email came into the workplace. We started using different tools. So Microsoft Outlook has been around for over 20 years now. And I guess that's where I saw an opportunity, because my experience was most people had Outlook at this point in time, but they weren't really using it as a proper planning or prioritization tool. It was just a big inbox with a calendar stuck in the side of it as a bit of a default. So I decided to start my own business. I have been working for another company, but I started my own business, Adapt, to really focus in on that area of productivity through technology. And that's all I've done since. I'm very niche, very passionate about the fact that you guys have, I believe, the best technology at your fingertips, but I don't believe that you're probably utilizing it in the best possible way. So I'm going to give you a few ideas today that might help you with that. Now, just give me a moment. I'm just going to go into share my presentation. So great. Jack, I might just get you to tell me, are you seeing my slide now?
Yep, all good.
Wonderful, great. Okay, so Over the last 18 years running Adapt, I've really thought deeply about productivity, and it led to me writing 2 books. About 4 or 5 years ago, I published Smart Work, which was all about your personal productivity and how you could utilize tools like Microsoft Outlook to manage your time and your priorities more effectively. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, especially within the context of keeping yourself organized in a remote working situation. 2 years ago, I published Smart Teams, which was all about how we work together more productively. And for me, this is a really important idea because I work in a lot of large corporates. Most of my clients would tend to be large corporates. And I tend to find that they don't always have productive cultures. And it doesn't matter how good your personal productivity is. If you're working in a culture that actually stops you from being productive, it's very frustrating. And I guess one of the things that I'm seeing when we're working remotely is this is amplified a little bit. So we'll share some ideas out of that. I am also publishing a new book in August of this year called Urgent, and this is a subject very close to my heart. It's all about the reactive urgent cultures that I tend to see in organizations and how we can learn to moderate urgency and dial it down when it's unnecessary, but also dial it up when it is necessary. So I'll have a few ideas coming from that today as well. So lots of stuff to talk about. Now, just before I jump into content, I want to get you to just reset and think about how you're going to engage over the next 40, 45 minutes. It was Timothy Leary, I think in 1966, who was made famous by saying, turn on, tune in and drop out. That's what I reckon happens sometimes on these webinars. We're all a bit over our virtual meetings now, I reckon. And I'm finding that a lot of people think that they can multitask. So you kind of think you can listen to this presentation and do your emails at the same time. And you've been very, very productive when you do that because you're multitasking. But the truth of it is you're not really getting anything productive done. You're just kind of playing around the edges. So what I'd like to do is reframe that. Instead of turn on, tune in and drop out, what I'd like you to do is to turn up, which you've done already. That's fantastic. So you're here, good on you. I want you to zone in. I want you to really think about what is it that I want to get out of this presentation? How could this help me in my productivity? And that means pay attention. And I also want you to block out any distractions. So we're all finding that when we're working from home, it can be a bit distracting. So try and set yourself up now for success here. So close the door in your office if you need to, put the kids in a cupboard, put the dog outside, whatever you need to do to be able to really focus. Because I promise you what I'm about to share with you is going to be really useful, really practical. Okay, so when it comes to working remotely, which is something that we're all grappling with, I realized that myself and my team already have a bit of experience with this because we're only a small team, but we actually do all work remotely anyway. We are dispersed around Sydney and the Central Coast, and we've worked this way for years. So when this all happened and we all had to kind of self-isolate, it wasn't a big change in the way that we worked, except that we weren't really interacting with clients anymore face-to-face. It was through webinar and video now. So I really thought about what are the lessons that we've learned over the last few years about how we work as a team together. And I think it really qualifies us to talk about the situation that you guys might be in. So it's not just about being professionally qualified around productivity, it's having some experience with working remotely. One of the things that my clients are saying to me more than ever is they are feeling a sense of disconnection. So they're wanting to connect with their teams. They're wanting to work in a way that was similar to, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. But it's hard. It's really hard when we're all fragmented. And I guess one of the things that I'm seeing is there are different feelings that we have in relation to the disconnection. So when we're disconnected, we feel a sense of doubt. We're not sure if what we're doing is valued. Sometimes we're not even sure what we should be doing. But when we get connected, we feel much more confident in ourselves. Sometimes there can be confusion instead of clarity. We get distracted very easily in a home environment. And what we want to try and get is some focus in our day and our week. Sometimes our work becomes invisible. This is one of the big problems that I'm seeing, because so many people manage their work in their inbox or in their paper notepad or in their head. It's actually invisible to everyone else, especially when you're not working around other people that you can have casual chats with. One of my clients yesterday was making the point to me that one of the things that they're really missing is the productivity that they had from casual conversations. They're not happening anymore, and it's really making it hard for them to be in the loop and be across what's happening, because they don't always have formal structures in place to inform people about every single thing that everyone else is doing. We can feel a sense of inertia, lethargy, and at the end of the day, a certain amount of ineffectiveness. So I guess what I'm hoping to do today is just give you some ideas around how you could get more connected and deal with some of these issues. Now, one of the things that I tend to see is this. When we feel disconnected, that increases the risk that we could cause friction for the people that we're working with, or they could cause friction for us. Now, what I mean by that is I'm talking about productivity friction. You see, every time we work with other people, there's a chance that we can drag their productivity down, or they can drag our productivity down. And when I wrote Smart Teams, my second book, this was one of the key ideas in Smart Teams. So what I want to do is to try and reduce the friction that we create for each other and try to increase the flow. So when we work in a way that is productive for both ourselves and for other people, it just gets things done easier. But I reckon that we actually put a lot of roadblocks in place, and we make it hard for our colleagues to be productive, and we make it hard for ourselves to be productive. Now, this is a picture of I'm trying to think of his name. I'm looking at the most famous New Zealand, or should I say Australian actor. Now, he is from New Zealand. This is Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind. He played Dr. John Nash, and in the movie, he's kind of credited with coming up with what's called game theory. And the truth is, he didn't come up with game theory. Game theory had been around in the 1950s when Nash was doing his work. But what he did do was he created a really important pillar that was added to the thinking behind game theory, which is called Nashs Equilibrium. So the idea was back then, a lot of economic thinking was built on the following premise, that the best result comes from everyone doing what is best for themselves. So when it came to economics, world economics, when it came to nuclear war scenario planning, when it came to the stock market, they worked on this principle that the best result always comes from everyone doing what is best for themselves. And for many, many years, that was the strong thinking. What John Nash realized was that was incomplete. And Nash's Equilibrium now states that the best result comes from everyone doing what is best for themselves and for the group at the same time. I think this is such an important concept, and this is now used in everything from the stock market to traffic flow analysis to economics, you name it, it's in there. Now, what I've done is I've kind of taken that idea and repurposed it for productivity, because I believe that the best result comes when we are working in a way that is productive for ourselves and for the group at the same time. And that means that we need to become more purposeful and mindful about how we work with the people around us, whether we're in the same office or whether we're in separate offices. We need to have a mind to how we're interacting and collaborating with them, and also how they are collaborating and working with us. Because every time we have a meeting, every time we send an email, every time we have an interaction on Microsoft Teams, every time we collaborate on a project, there is a risk that either we're going to drag their productivity down or they're going to drag our productivity down. And this has a huge cost in the workplace, because we all end up kind of walking into a headwind. We're trying to get our work done, but it's really hard because there's just so much friction involved. So for me, productivity is not just a personal problem. So we talk a lot about personal productivity and smart work. My first book is all about personal productivity, but it's not just a personal problem, it's actually a cultural problem. And we need to see it as that. The cultures in our organizations can be productive cultures, or they can be unproductive cultures. And I guess what I'm going to suggest to you is you've got some control over this. You're the one who can start to shift the culture in your organization. So here's the problem. I go into a lot of organizations, I talk about this, and people say to me, look, this is all very well and good, but I can't change the culture of NAB or of DLA Piper or whatever the organization is. Most people feel that they're a victim of their culture and they have no control over it. So this is a picture of Mount Gower on Lord Howe Island. And when we can travel again, my one piece of advice to all of you is go to Lord Howe Island. If you've never been, it is a special place. Now, it's a volcanic rim that rises out of the sea. And at one end of the island, you've got a 900-meter high peak called Mount Gower. Now, there is a climb that you can do to the top of Mount Gower. You have to go with a guide. And I did it last year with my then 18-year-old son, Finn. Scariest thing I have ever done in my life. I am incredibly afraid of heights, but Finn was really keen to do it. And I went, okay, let's give it a go. So we climbed up to the top of Mount Gower. My hands were red with blood from holding on to the rope so tightly. We didn't have to have mountaineering experience, but there was a stretch of cliff that we had to climb, which was 800 meters high, and it just absolutely freaked me out. Anyway, got to the top, and wow, was it worth it. You see the clouds at the top of Mount Gower. The reason they're there was no clouds anywhere else in the sky except over that mountain. You see, Mount Gower is so big that it actually has its own microclimate. It has its own weather conditions. And when you get to the top of Mount Gower, it's actually got plants and animals that live there that live nowhere else in the world. Incredibly special. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is this. I reckon you might not be able to change the culture of your whole organization, but I reckon that you could create a microculture within your own team. That's a good starting point. And if you do that, I reckon you can do what Stephen Scott Johnson talks about in his book Emergent, which is all about creating cultural change. He says that what we need to do is to start cultural change at the team level and then create ripples that influence the rest of the organization. That is how true, sustained cultural change happens. So what I'm about to share with you, I reckon you can do with your team and then influence the teams around you. So when it comes to productivity friction, I see it appear in three different ways. And the first is around our communications. So I reckon when it comes to communications, the default tool is email. The old saying goes, when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I reckon for a lot of people, email is that hammer, and we're overusing it. We were overusing it before when we were all working together in the office. But now that we're all working remotely, we are definitely overusing it. I've had feedback from a lot of my clients to say that their email volumes have gone right through the roof. So I reckon we need to do something about that, because a lot of those emails are just noise. So three ways that this tends to show up. Number one, the volume of noise that you create for other people and that they potentially create for you. I reckon that if you don't think about as a team how you use things like CC, reply all, how you structure your emails, when you use email versus when you use another tool, that's just creating noise. I reckon the quality of our content also has a bit to be improved. So I often find that we're busy and we just whip out emails And we don't think too much about how to structure them to make it easy for the reader, the person on the other end, and that causes productivity friction. And then finally, sometimes there's problems around the intent of the message. Sometimes we use email inappropriately, we say inappropriate things, or we use emails in situations where an email is not the right thing to do. So if you are sacking someone, probably an email isn't the way to go. Face-to-face might be better in that situation. So when something's sensitive, we should be really thoughtful about that. So we'll talk a little bit about communicate. I reckon the second way that we tend to cause productivity friction is when we congregate, so when we come together and meet. And again, this is a massive problem in the remote context because so many people aren't really comfortable yet with virtual meetings and using the technology. And you know, one of the piece of feedback I'm getting from clients is that we have to spend so much more time connecting with people at the start of meetings because they are feeling so disconnected that it eats into the productive time in the meeting. And that's just the reality of where we're at the moment. Again, 3 things that we need to think about when it comes to your meetings. Number 1, the volume or the number of meetings that you attend. I'm working with a senior director in a bank at the moment, so she will be on the executive of the bank. And she is basically in meetings from 7 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night at the moment. No break, just meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. Crazy, it's just untenable. And I reckon, you know, in our normal work, we were attending too many meetings. I reckon that you guys should probably do 100% less meetings. Now, what I mean by that is I think you could very easily have 25% fewer meetings if you thought about it. You could have 25% shorter meetings. You could have 25% fewer participants in those meetings, and you could have 25% less wasted time if you organise them properly. Now, I'm Irish, but that adds up to 100% to me. Okay, being facetious here, but you know what I'm talking about. I reckon there's also some problems around the quality of the process. So if you're not structuring your meeting well, if you don't have an agenda, if you don't have a clear outcome that's been communicated to the group, then a lot of time gets wasted. And then finally, there's the actual management of time in the meeting. People turning up late, the meeting running over, not managing your agenda items to time. They're all time management issues with your meetings. The third area that I talk about in Smart Teams is collaborate. And I guess I see communicate and congregate as being subsets of collaboration because it's how we get stuff done with other people. But there are a few things worth mentioning outside of the pure meeting and email context. So I reckon that one of the things that we need to think about is how do we moderate urgency? Do you ever find that everything is needed now? Everything is ASAP, everything is urgent. And of course, everything isn't urgent, but we're working in an environment where that's become the norm now. And a lot of people are getting very stressed and burning out because they're constantly working in a state of reactivity. So I reckon as managers, we need to manage this. We need to be able to spot when there is unproductive urgency, and we need to be able to dial it down if we possibly can. Visibility of work, I'm going to be talking about this in more detail in a few minutes. How can we make our work visible across the team so everyone knows what they should be working on and where people are at? And then finally, in collaboration, we also need to think about how we delegate work, especially when we're working remotely. And it's not just the actual delegation of the work, it's also how do we manage when things are due back to us? How do we clearly communicate when something needs to be back to us and then not forget about it? These are all things that a lot of people don't have strategies in place around. So for me, the real key to this is creating a set of team agreements. If you want to create a more productive microculture within your team, I reckon what you need to do is you need to sit down with your team and create some agreed behaviors around your meetings, around your use of email, and around how you collaborate. And this is a very simple idea, but very powerful. If you can create some agreements, it will shift things. Now, I'm just going to go out of presentation mode for a second, because I want big screen, so I should be kind of coming up big screen on the camera now. I'm going to go to my blackboard. I've kind of gone old school with this. When I was at school, I used to sit down the back of the class, and I didn't wear glasses. I should have worn glasses from the age of 12, but I didn't. And I always remember not being able to see the blackboard, and I had to copy off the guy I was sitting beside all the time. So my blackboard is a reminder to me always that I should have paid more attention at school. So I love that. So what I want to share with you is the idea that team agreements serve a very important role when it comes to how we shift our culture. You see, I reckon there's a big gap between our good intentions, because we all have good intentions. We all kind of come into work and we want to be productive. We want to do a great job. But there's a big gap between our intentions and our actual behaviors. So we mean to be productive, we mean to work in a way that creates flow rather than friction, but the problem is our actual behaviors, especially when we get busy, do not reflect our good intentions. So for me, what's going to bridge the gap between your good intentions and your actual behaviors are team agreements. Now, what also happens is this. The thing that probably informs your good intentions are your values, or what we call qualities. So, you know, when you have team members who've got good values around how they work, when they work in a purposeful way, when they are mindful, when they are punctual, these are all values or qualities that people bring to the table that can really help, and that will then inform the good intentions. But what actually happens then when we build team agreements and it starts to change our behaviors, that's what actually shifts your culture. Hopefully I haven't gone off screen there. I'm not sure if I have or not. It's your behaviors that actually shift your culture. And I believe that culture is just a set of group behaviors. So this is so, so important, I reckon. Let's go back to sharing. So we've talked through that. Don't need to do that with you. So let's now look at some of the technical detail that sits behind this and have a look at how our tools can actually help us with this. A friend of mine, Cameron Schwab, he was the youngest CEO of a footy club a number of years ago. It's gone back about 20 years or so. He became the CEO of Richmond Footy Club, and he was only about 25. And in a conversation with Cameron there a little while back, he said to me that in footy, it's not necessarily the best team that will win, it's the best system. So he reckons that clubs have a system of play, and the success of your team is really dependent on how good your system is, because a game of footy is a game of lots of unknowns, the bounce of the ball, a tackle, and players getting injured. And what tends to happen is players rely on their system, especially when they start to get tired and the play starts to break down. And I reckon that what's going to help us with this stuff is a good system. Now, when it comes to productivity, I reckon there are probably 3 things that you need to think about with a productivity system. There are your behaviors, talked about them. There's probably a set of processes that you have within your team around how you do work. And what I really want to focus on here, there's a set of tools that you can use to help you to work more productively. Now, imagine a superhero partnership like Batman and Robin. I reckon that when it comes to your personal productivity, the superhero partnership would be Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft OneNote. So I have no doubt in my mind that from a personal productivity point of view, there are no better tools around. I do not get paid by Microsoft to say this. I say this because I have tried every single productivity tool that is out there, and I've never met one that beat Microsoft Outlook and then the combination of Outlook and OneNote. So I want to share a few ideas and tricks with you in that tool. When it comes to team productivity, we'll have a talk about Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Planner, because from a collaboration point of view, they are the perfect tools to help you to work together more productively. But the problem is, in my experience, most people are not really leveraging these tools. In fact, people are fighting against them. When Microsoft Teams came out, people started going, oh, bloody hell, another tool that we need to learn. And they didn't understand the context of it or why it was necessary. To be honest, Microsoft Planner, most of my clients don't even know it exists, and yet it's on their desktop and has been for over 12 months. So I reckon that that's a bit of a crime. So let me take a drink of water. So when it comes to Outlook, very passionate about Outlook as a productivity tool. I reckon that when it comes to Outlook, Outlook helps you to manage your workload effectively. And the real beauty of it is every part of Outlook talks to every other part of Outlook. So primarily Outlook for most people is an email tool. It's an inbox where you receive emails. But I don't really see it as an email tool. I see it as a workload management tool. So for me, the main view that I look at when I'm in Outlook is not my inbox. As far as I'm concerned, my inbox is basically an organizing system for everyone else's priorities. What I tend to look at most of the time is the calendar view in Outlook. And I've actually set it up in a very particular way. So one of the things that I've done, you'll see in the screenshot here, I've actually opened up the to-do bar in Outlook. Now, this is the thing. You're all using the calendar in Outlook to manage your meetings. I've no doubt about that. Excuse me, I'm just going to cough. That's better. So you're all using the calendar in Outlook to manage your meetings, but I would reckon that maybe 10 to 20% of you are using the task management system in Outlook. And yet it's the most powerful task management system that I've come across if you set it up in the right way. So I've done a few little tricky things in Outlook. I've set it up. I brought the task management system into my calendar so that I get a holistic view of my workload. So I can see both my meeting workload and my priorities for the day in one view. That's incredibly important to me. I've also done things like I've set up a little formatting rule to make my high priority tasks stand out. So those blue tasks up the top of the list are high priorities. And that allows me to sequence my task list and give it some order and to give it a real clear definition between what's a must do and what's a nice to do. So just a couple of things there that I've done to turn this into a dashboard that clearly shows me what I need to do today. And there's another view in Outlook which gives you a bigger picture perspective. So if I zoom out to the week view, there's also a little window you can open at the bottom of your calendar called the daily task list. And this is where I plan and organize my time over the week. So the first screenshot was better for doing your work and managing your work, but this is really good for planning and organizing. So the reason why this is so compelling for me is related to my email. So my experience is most people do not manage their inboxes effectively. In fact, the worst inbox I've ever come across had no less than 129,546 emails in it. That is ludicrous. Some of you are probably laughing because you're going, oh, that's me, or that's your boss. That's crazy. Your inbox is a workspace. It's like your desk, and it should be kept clear because when your workspace is clear, your mind is clear, you're more focused. Now, I believe in getting your inbox under control, and that means that you don't use your inbox as your to-do list. What I want you to do is use your action management system as your to-do list. So the combination of my calendar and my tasks, that's my action management system. And you can do really simple things like this. I've set up a little toolbar using quick steps, which allows me to process emails very quickly and easily. So if I need to respond to an email, obviously I press reply or forward or whatever it might be. When I need to delete an email, I've set up a little delete quick step so that all of my actions are in one place. When I want to file an email, I'm a believer of having one filing folder, and I've set up a quick step that will just put the email straight into that folder. Incredibly efficient. And then finally, if I want to action an email, all I need to do is to press create task or create appointment, and it will copy that email into my task list or into my calendar and allow me to manage my time around that piece of work. That is so, so critical. So this is the way Microsoft Outlook was designed to be used 20 years ago. And yet in my experience, and I've trained hundreds of thousands of people in this, very few people use Outlook in this way. It's a crime. So do yourself a favor, have a play with Outlook, see how you could set it up. So a couple of quick strategies off the back of that when it comes to managing your time and your information. Clear your inbox to 0 on a regular basis. So once a week, I get my inbox down to 0. Focus your day with a plan each day. So start your day by getting really clear about what are my meetings and what are my priorities for the day ahead and what's the order of priority. And then finally, be responsive, not reactive. Could I ask you all to do this for me? I want you to turn off your email alerts on both your desktop and on your phone. Don't get distracted every time an email comes in. Turn them all off and then go and check your email at regular points in time throughout the day. I probably spend half an hour, 45 minutes on my email in the morning. I'd spend half an hour on my email in the afternoon. And about once an hour, I'll have a quick check to see if there's anything urgent. That's a reasonably healthy approach to my inbox, I reckon. When it comes to OneNote, the thing I like about OneNote is it's more than just a tool for taking notes in meetings. For me, it's a personal information management system. And the thing I really love about it is the fact that it talks to Outlook. So in OneNote, and again, some of you are probably using OneNote, some of you maybe not, some of you are just dabbling with it. In OneNote, 2 features really make it a super tool for me. One is the fact that I can capture an action in OneNote and I can send it to my task list in Outlook by clicking on the Outlook task button. That's super powerful when you're in meetings. I try not to leave any meeting without all my actions being either done, delegated, or scheduled into my system. That way I'm clean. But what also happens is Outlook talks to OneNote. So if I'm going into a meeting with Jack and I wanted to quickly grab all the meeting details from my calendar, I can go into OneNote, create a new notes page, and then click on meeting details, and it will look at all my meetings in my calendar today and allow me to draw in the information. So quick and easy, so they talk to each other. Very, very powerful. And my mindset around this is, when I think of something that I need to do, I capture it in Outlook. If I think of something I need to discuss, I capture it in OneNote. So I've got a one-stop shop for anything that I think of. So whenever I think of something I need to do, I either do it or I get it into my system. But if I think of something I need to talk to my EA about, Chantel, this is one of the ways that we work together really productively because when we're remote. If I think of something I need to talk to Chantel about, instead of ringing her immediately or flicking her an email and just creating more email noise for her, if it could wait until we have our catch-up, one-on-one catch-up tomorrow, I've got a page in OneNote where I keep a list of things that I need to talk to her about. And guess what? I've also shared that notebook with her. So whenever she thinks of something she needs to talk to me about, she adds it to the list. So when we catch up tomorrow, we've got a really productive conversation because we've captured everything that we need to talk to each other about. This is not rocket science, folks. It's very easy. So a couple of OneNote strategies: capture and organize your digital information. You can send emails into OneNote. You can print web pages into OneNote. This is a way of organizing information that is relevant to your work. So use it for more than just your meeting information. Plan your one-on-one discussions like I just suggested. And share your notebooks with colleagues. So OneNote is probably not a tool that you'll use across a very large team, but the people that you work really closely with, I'd recommend sharing notebooks with them so that you can all kind of have visibility over that information as a small team. Makes a lot of sense. Now, you remember I talked about this superhero partnership thing? We've talked about the 2 tools that are relevant when it comes to our personal productivity, but I don't want to forget about the team productivity. And I know Microsoft have put a lot of effort in recently into really promoting tools like Microsoft Teams. And in fact, they've created this whole ecosystem for collaborating and working. And it's really paying dividends now because, it's funny, I've seen a lot of my very large clients go over to Office 365 in the last 2 years. But the reality is they've never really embraced using Teams. They've all just gone, yeah, too hard. And now with COVID and the fact that everyone is working remotely, suddenly everyone's getting real good at using Teams real fast. So I guess we also need to have a look at that and think about where that fits into the mix. So when it comes to your personal productivity, we've already talked about the fact that Outlook is a tool that is designed to manage your time, and OneNote is a tool that is designed to manage your information. So for me, the combination of those things is all about organizing all the information in your world. I think we've got that covered. That's a good foundation. But when it comes to Microsoft Teams, for me, its main purpose is for managing discussions. Now, what I mean by this is Teams is a tool that won't replace email. There's still a need for email, but what it does replace is probably all those reply all conversations that we have when we're working with other people in a group. So we send an email out and then someone goes reply all, and before you know it, you've got 20 emails in your inbox. And the problem is that those emails get fragmented, and it's very hard to really think about the content of those discussions. So for me, that's the true purpose of a tool like Teams. It brings everything together into one space. It provides context, and it helps you to communicate far more effectively. One of my clients has spent the last 12 months really working on a cultural change within his team to get them to move away from email. This is a tech company. The management team were probably getting 400 to 500 emails a day, and they were completely overwhelmed. So he started to work with them and tried to shift them over to Teams, but it was really hard because they kept reverting back to email. So then he decided that he would put a team agreement in place, and that was if the communication is about a project, we use Teams. If it's about business as usual stuff, we still use email. So he made Teams a very specific function. And what he found over 12 months of really, working on this cultural change, their email volume has gone down substantially. I met up with him before Christmas, and he reckoned that he was now getting about 80 to 100 emails a day, and that was down from 500. So massive change in the amount of noise, and they're really using Teams well. So if you're in that situation where you're struggling to get traction with Teams, it takes time. It's not an overnight thing. It's a cultural change. And as a leader or a manager, you need to lead that. The other tool that I'm a huge fan of is Microsoft Planner, and this is something that we use a lot in our team to make work visible across the team. It's a very simple kind of board type interface, so it's very much based on other tools that you would see out there, like Asana or Trello, and it just gives you a very simple way of making those bigger chunks of work, things like projects and processes, much more visible across the team. It allows you to see who's doing what and where they're up to and what's next. And I reckon that the combination of using Planner with these other tools, what that does is it makes your work much more visible. And that's so important when we're working in this remote environment. We need to make our work visible, and it helps us to collaborate on those bigger initiatives more effectively. So I guess my call to you is, if you are not really using these tools to work with your team, get on board, start using them. Know that it's not going to be a quick fix, but realize that these are not just another tool that we need to learn to use. They are part of an ecosystem that help us to be productive, both at the personal level and at the team level. Okay, so a lot of content coming at you there. I'm going to stop. I'm going to ask for questions. So hopefully Jack has been tracking the chat feature. Jack, have we got any questions?
A bit of discussion. We've got some support for your Lord Howe Island. There's that's seen some activity. We were just discussing more broadly within the chat tasks and how there's actually going to be some great updates to Planner, To Do, and Outlook. There's a sort of an integration coming soon, I think, starting in May, which will sort of take your foundation there and hopefully build on it. Which
yeah. So at the moment, I believe that the task feature in Planner synchronizes to the online version of Outlook through the To Do app, but that doesn't translate into the desktop version of Outlook yet. But as you say, that's coming, and that's going to create a beautiful integration when it happens.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Just picking up on some of your points there, for me personally, with the turning off email notifications, there's the focus assist within Windows 10 is great. You can sort of set priority lists for particular people and shut out that noise, because I know for me personally, I'm very easily distracted. Yeah. We have had bit of discussion here. I think for me personally, an issue that I've really faced when working within my team is how to maintain the level of creativity that's required with some workshops and sort of ideation sessions that you need, sort of for optimal sort of outcomes, people in one room. And you mentioned there those sort of corridor conversations and that sort of soft sort of collaboration. How do you, any sort of pointers on how to keep sort of creativity alive?
Yeah, look, I'm very tech savvy and very tech enabled, so I pretty much organize myself using technology, but I still think on paper. And when it comes to ideation and thinking, I think most people are more comfortable drawing than they are typing. So one of the things that we do in our team is I have a Microsoft Studio, a Surface Studio, which allows me to draw on screen. So I've got my Microsoft pen here. Now, a lot of people will have a Surface Pro or whatever it might be. But in meetings, I will often, go to the whiteboard feature and I'll draw things and we'll all interact with that. So all these tools give us the ability to not just have one person present, but actually involve everyone in detailing what that looks like. And that brings people into a creative process. Another way of doing it is going old school and using my Blackboard. So my new book, Urgent, was written on this Blackboard. And I don't mean I wrote every word of the book on the Blackboard, but all of the big ideas I mapped out on that. So when I see people working from home, and I know that this is easier said than done, but I often think they need some sort of a whiteboard so that they can step back and get a bigger picture visual instead of just working on the laptop screen all the time. Yeah, and I think there's some of that whiteboard feature in Teams is great for that, and being able to sort of capture analog whiteboards with the Microsoft Lens and digitize that content is great as well. I think with the note taking, there's a lot of research around actually understanding, sort of manually taking notes. It helps you to process information, whereas sort of verbatim capturing sort of what's being said sort of on a online is doesn't get in as well. We've had another question here just regarding the reporting demands that sort of working from home has seen an increase in. So sort of multiple people wanting sort of reports and sort of visibility on sort of multiple different sort of areas of the project. So is there anything you can sort of give us that sort of helps to how do we satisfy sort of multiple sort of demands and the requirement for sort of multiple reports when we're working from home? So, I guess those reports could be a part of the normal workflow in your business, and the fact that you're not having those quick conversations with people about where work is at. So there's maybe a more need for formal reporting, but it could also, that question could also be about reporting on people's time and how people are using their time, because there's a fear that organizations have that when you're working from home, you're not actually doing anything. And I don't believe that is true. Most people are honest, and most people want to do a great job, whether they're at home or they're in the office. They want to do great work. So organizations need to trust a little bit. But I do think that tools like Planner can help make that work visible across the team. And what it provides is something that you can throw up on screen in a, let's say, a Microsoft Teams meeting. You can throw it up on screen and have a robust conversation about where the work is at, what people have been working on this week, what's getting blocked in the pipeline, and what people are going to be doing next week. I think that sort of conversation, when you make the work visible, is highly productive, and it negates the need for someone to compile a report on that piece of work, because you're having a conversation around a piece of work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is still sort of requirement from sort of management and sort of that old school working patterns. And again, it's a behavioural, loops back down to sort of behaviour, but there is a sort of a desire to see, sort of work done, lists ticked, and I suppose that's sort of a more broader sort of cultural shift that we have to embark on.
It's one of the reasons why I use tasks in Microsoft Outlook, because I'm able to go back and see all of the things that I've completed over the last week. A lot of people don't have that visibility of the work. When they're writing out a manual to-do list on a paper notepad, they don't have any real sense of what they did last week. They just know that they were very busy. Whereas, you can take a screenshot of your list in Outlook and send it to your manager, or indeed, Outlook is just a souped up Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. So you can actually export your task list from Outlook into an Excel spreadsheet and be able to provide a ready-made report very quickly and easily if you need to.
Very good. We're sort of nearing the end here. I think that wraps up this this session nicely. If there's any more, I don't think there's any more questions. So if there's nothing more from yourself, Dermot?
I'm going to leave you with one final thought. I'll leave everyone with this final thought. So Calvin Cooley said, we cannot do everything at once, but we can do something at once. So my question to you is, what will you do at once after this session to make a difference to your personal or your team productivity? Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Dermot. Excellent.
Pleasure, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye-bye.